listening to The Future of Education, brought to you by McMillan Pazdan Smith.
Hello, I'm Jana Hartenstein, and I'm an architect and the higher education practice area leader for McMillan Pazdan Smith. Today I'm joined by my two colleagues, Minta Ferguson, who is the Director of Planning and the leader of MPS Advisors, and then also Alec Stover, who's an experienced advisory service data analyst. And we're going to talk a little bit about what advisory services is and what it means for our higher education practice. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about your area of expertise and what led you to teaming up to deliver advisory services for the higher education practice.
Thanks, Jana. So I'm an architect, but I specialize in planning, and I work across a few of MPS's practice areas with advisory services. So that's healthcare, civic and cultural, K-12, and of course, one of my personal favorites, which is higher education. And I really enjoy streaming together strategy, planning, and operations to create an informed solution. We started advisory services about maybe over a little 3 years ago, and we saw a notable need for clients to use their data in a meaningful way. They needed to be good stewards of their funds. They needed to build consensus, complete due diligence, and ultimately it had a great impact on teaching and education. So we wanted to integrate that informed decision-making into the design process.
Alec?
Absolutely. So I was brought on 2 years ago as a GIS and data analyst for the advisory services team. And funny enough, my very first project that I worked on with McMillan Pazdan Smith was higher education, particularly with things like space utilization and room demand, which has been really rewarding.
Talking a little bit more about what brought you to the higher education practice. Also, I mean, we do work on a lot of projects together now, but can you share with our listeners what your advisory team does?
First of all, we leverage our clients' data as well as industry data, and we're trying to help them with how their spaces are used, how they're growing, maybe not growing, where they have challenges and opportunities. Ultimately, we combine that quantitative analysis with a qualitative analysis to create well-rounded and informed space and operational solutions for facility design.
I think about some master plans from the past that a lot of people have done that don't have the data and backup, and I always feel like they're somewhat hollow. They're not defendable, even when people talk about only what they want. Why do you think it's beneficial to have these type of services embedded in an architecture firm as opposed to going out, and outsourcing that?
One of the reasons I joined MPS in particular was to really integrate the data into the design world, because we can solve a lot more problems when we do the two together. And so when both are integrated into an architecture and advisory services firm, into one organization, we have the ability to create a seamless workflow. We can reduce or simplify project schedules. We create a much more effective communication plan. So we don't have those cold handoffs that firms may have if they're utilizing an outside consultant. And I think another great benefit is we can elevate our own team's knowledge and experience and create more opportunities for them.
Agreed. I've definitely really enjoyed watching the studio mingle and mix in with you all included. And I might even worry sometimes I'm going to lose a young designer to just doing planning and programming it. That it's been really great for our studio to see the benefits of just thinking past what something looks like and how just it functions, but really what it needs to do and who it needs to serve. Alec, I always tell people my niece just graduated from geology in college, and I'm very proud of her. And I think about what got her into doing that. It was being outside and hiking in national parks, et cetera. But I always look at her and I'm like, hey, we've got a geology major in our office. Do you want to come over to architecture? But you have a background in geographic information systems and data analytics. And can you talk about GIS capabilities, how you use them?
Of course. So I started off in college as a geology major, and then through that pathway actually found GIS, geographic information systems. And I really fell in love with the art behind, being able to present these types of data-backed messages in a cartographic view. So from there, that really knocked the door off the hinges in a data analyst realm. GIS in particular it's constantly evolving, and it's very, very rewarding to keep track of in terms of data visualization. Particularly with GIS, it grants a sense of familiarity to the client where it's not a traditional visual in itself, not like a chart or a graph, but you're able to see spatially, this is your facility, this is your campus, and now it's being able to process, this is the community that you serve, these are the demographics of the people who live in the area that you are providing your service to. So that has become, in the past 2 years, a staple in a lot of the projects we do, practice area wide, but also particularly with higher education.
I think it's great because people, when they see something visually, they can connect with it really easily. So if you see something on a map, you know where it is, right? You can portray 5 different data points, just as an example, on one map, and people are going to be able to pick up on that really quickly. So it's an easy way to connect information with people. Yep.
Absolutely.
So it's been said that those who own the data own the future. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you?
It seems that in the past that ownership of one's data was kind of an end goal for many, whereas now it's oftentimes focused towards the beginning of a process that we work with. Through the ownership of data, specifically early on in a project, those actionable insights from messaging, the effective messaging towards the decision makers is really, really the future that we're trying to strive to. And when that data is compiled and organized and owned, there is an infinite number of strategies you can take. When you have the capability of presenting what you own, anything is possible.
Throughout my career in higher education, I've noticed that, people want things. You sit down with these multi-user groups, from facilities groups to leadership to the end users, faculty and staff, and they can tell you what they want and need all day, but sometimes it just doesn't match up with actually what you discover. And, without you all we hear is the qualitative. And I think it's really important to have that data for them and their growth.
So I really think it's the difference between perception and reality. People feel or think a certain way, but oftentimes we need the data to either help us confirm that information or challenge that information. And so it really helps validate the way people think and feel a lot of times. So we're not making ill-informed decisions.
It eliminates a lot of the guesswork as well. There's always going to be that trust your gut decision endpoint at some point through the process. But when you have that data to back up what the decision is ultimately, not only do you have the qualitative input from word of mouth conversation where everybody knows that this is a space that could be used better or may just not be a desirable space at all. But when you really look into the metrics of why that space is not being used, it helps to inform what could be done to this space to amplify it.
A very real example. So some faculty may feel like they need additional classrooms, but as we dig deeper, it may actually be that they need some improved technology in a couple of their existing classrooms, or maybe there's a really pesky air handler right above one of those rooms. It's vibrating, it's loud, and they just hate teaching in there, right? So there could be investments in other things to help better utilization of existing space.
No doubt about that. I think we never don't find some sort of situation that looks like that. So when do you think is the best time for an institution to reach out and receive advisory services? I mean, we know there's all sorts of planning cycles throughout an institution. A lot of times we don't get the chance to submit until it's advertised. So can you talk a little bit about when is the best time to consider using advisory services?
There's a few different times depending on the application. I think I'll maybe talk about 2 of those. The first one is what I think is probably the most important. And that's either during or as you complete a strategic plan for an institution. You can use the information from the strategic plan to help inform a vision across a campus. You can actually also use information from the data that may be completed, for example, in a master plan to help inform some strategic planning. Ultimately, I think those two are related. You want to execute on that strategy, and you need to figure out how to do that across a campus. The other would be if you need to complete due diligence, right? You need to get traction, build consensus among stakeholders, boards, councils to get funding for projects. And maybe you aren't sure what the program needs to be, what the student growth is, what the classroom utilization needs to look like. You want to reassess your staff work styles and the space that you allocate for them. And you want to understand perhaps like future models, precedent studies, evidence-based solutions to inform the program and plan.
Minta, what drives you?
I would say curiosity is really what drives me. It's that constant pursuit of those aha moments that do something for our clients, do something for our own people. And I think it's great because one of our own core values is to be curious. And I think I align best with that value.
How about you, Alec?
One of my particularly favorite moments throughout the project is whenever we really get to message to our client. The data analysis does not have to be this, behind closed door process. It's very interactive and dynamic and conversational, and hearing input about, the space occupied by these individuals who spend a great deal of time there. And at the end of the day, being able to assist in the messaging of what this institution could be in the future for future students and faculty and staff is very, very gratifying.
And I've seen the amounts of data the two of you get in from clients, and it's overwhelming. And then, watch you work through it and filter it and all of a sudden come out with this great outcome. How do you take data and make it an easy set of information for someone to use?
Part of the analysis is the organization at the end and formatting things in a way that multiple audiences with varied understanding of the project or the analysis as a whole are able to filter themselves to use as a tool that they can put their hands on and drill down to their adjacencies, their program, their spaces as it relates to them. Gone are the days of where we provide just tables and metrics where things are a little bit sleek and they can be played with. And there's less as a whole involved, but whenever you get really down hands into the clay analysis, then we're able to present these takeaways in a much more dynamic, interactive way.
Another way to frame it or think about it is, what does it mean, like as an architect, someone who's designing the project, or to an end user, what are we trying to get to? What is the answer? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And what information do we need to be able to see to come to a conclusion? Like, how are we going to solve it? And I think that oftentimes informs how we shape the data, what kind of table we're going to use, what kind of correlations do we need. Sometimes it's very intentional, and sometimes it may be exploratory.
One of the big things that we like to consider too is placing your feet in the shoes of the audience themselves. At what level are they at in which they're going to view this? Do they want a very high level understanding, or do they want a very detailed understanding?
So next, I want you all to share a couple examples of how your work made a tangible, positive impact for a client.
So we've worked with a private liberal arts college on a master plan. And in that master plan, we found two programs that needed a clear identity. They're growing programs. They have additional staff that need space. They don't have space for those people. And so we're able to put programs together for those facilities. It also identified what some people may feel are like really trivial things as the low-hanging fruit, but they have a really high percentage of international students. So they don't have cars. They live in a a city where there's not, public transportation. Not even some of the local people have cars for them to use. So something as simple as adding like a campus grocery, just a market with some of the basic things was huge for them. So we were able to discover that as part of the process. And we're also able to look at their class scheduling, and we found some major challenges that particularly some of their freshmen were experiencing, all because of some scheduling rules that they had put together. So we could make recommendations on class scheduling as well.
That was on a master plan level.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about maybe a smaller example where you were incorporated into a team that maybe didn't even expect that they would know they needed services before we started the project?
There was another smaller private institution in which, before they ended up deciding whether or not they wanted to do a master plan, where they were interested in just a space utilization assessment to kind of gauge, what spaces throughout the campus are particularly cramped. Prior to 2021, they were an all-female college. They are now co-ed, and that played a great deal into what's the vision of this campus going to look like in the future. There are a number of facilities throughout the campus that, because the institution is now co-ed, may need to change in logistics and efficiency to compensate for now a male student body population, particularly with things like residency and athletics. And that came about through the space needs assessment, where it was something that we determined would be greatly helpful for the institution going forward.
I think another example is for a community college where we're working on a renovation, and there's a program, right? You want to get a lot in, but feeling like you don't have the space for it. And so the design team quickly realized, hey, we need to understand what spaces are utilized and how they're utilized to understand where we have opportunity to maximize the program. So they were able to bring us in, do a quick utilization study as part of the project. Coming out of that, we're able to get that program in, right? So that meant they didn't have to build more space. It meant that they could offer those programs and classes, and it meant that they didn't have to add all this additional cost or lose revenue.
We've hit on space utilization several times, but demographics is an important service you provide. Can you give us an example of a higher education project that benefited from that aspect of what you do?
We can. So there was another example of a technical college that was looking to expand with a new facility, not very far away from the main campus, but enough so that the demographic variable approach was evident. So part of that entailed a number of different proposed sites, as well as some walking and driving time distances within the county and city that they were interested in. Through that, we are able to overlay whichever kind of demographic or socioeconomic variables within that area particularly matched up with what the institution was looking for. Part of this also entailed things like sites of interest with various industries. How close in proximity to a proposed campus would many of these local industries or businesses be? Equally as important, the amenities around the campus. If they were to go forward with this facility, how close are things that students, faculty, and staff would need on a daily basis? How accessible are those to where they're going to be studying?
Yeah, we definitely see the direct relation between industry and our community colleges for sure. And it's been great to understand where growth should be based on some of the master plans we've done. So we're at the end of our time here. And I want to thank everyone for listening and learning a little bit more about our advisory services. Hopefully it's opened up maybe some new information about MPS that you didn't know before. And thank Alec and Minta for being so candid in their responses. Along with this podcast, we're sending out a survey. And what we would love, if you're able to, send us some topics that you would like to hear more about. I definitely have told Alec and Minta I'd love to dig in a little bit more to the demographic cliff, and also potentially the idea of how higher education offices and workplace does not really mirror the actual corporate world that most of our students are going into, and understanding that space is expensive And those are two topics that we've thought about, but we would really be more interested in hearing about what you would like to hear from their expertise, and follow this podcast up with a couple more to go through those.
I'd love to do some deep dives on. Those are good topics.
Absolutely. So hopefully we'll hear from you, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jana.
Thank you, Jana. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us on the Future of Education. If you enjoyed this discussion, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. And please check out our other episodes.